You arrive at a location that should be stunning, but the background, total chaos. Fences, signs, benches, and that voice in your head says, that's too much. So you snap a quick photo just to say you tried and move on. But here's the thing, these are the moments that test your eye more than perfect scenes ever will. And if you know how to look, you can still find the shot. Today, I'll show you how I isolated my subject and created my favorite photo of the entire project in the Alps. Hey, I'm Albrecht Voss, architectural photographer and Hasselblad master. This series takes you behind the scenes of how I created Enlighten, a fine art project shot in the Alps using a prototype of the Hasselblad X2D. If you missed the last episode on creating breathtaking images in bad weather conditions, watch it after this. Now let's get into today's story. After an icy, steep descent from Bivako Luka Vuerik and 5 hours of driving, we arrived in the charming village of Finkenberg, Austria, just in time to catch the last gondola up the mountain. When we stepped off the lift at the top, I was a bit stunned. I knew our next shooting location, the Granatkapelle, wasn't sitting alone up there in untouched nature. But no photo I had seen online had prepared me for just how much visual clutter surrounded it. 4 lift stations, 3 restaurants, a ski school, and tons of trails, fences and benches stood between me and the clean minimal image of a chapel in raw alpine scenery that I had envisioned. At first I was overwhelmed. In my head I started drafting a plan for hours of Photoshop retouching just to clear the background. Well, let's be honest, if it were easy it wouldn't be any fun, right? We dropped our gear off at Granada, and as tempting as those warm, soft beds were, we headed straight back outside with our cameras, because on the horizon a dark, heavy cloud front was rolling in. If you look up the Granatkapelle, designed by famous architect Mario Botta, you'll notice that nearly every photo online shows it with the artificial lake beside it. That lake acts as a water reservoir for the snow cannons in winter. So naturally, that's where we headed first. Once we reached the water, I looked through my viewfinder of my Hasselblad X2D. Here was a bright hiking path, there a wooden bench, and over in the corner the legs of a lift tower creeping into the frame. And here's where the first real lesson comes in. If you want to isolate your subject in a busy or messy environment, you have to change your perspective. I set up my Hasselblad X2D with the XCD 38V lens on my beloved Gitzo Traveler Series 2 tripod, as low to the ground as possible. The tripod legs were already half submerged in the lake. Because the lake bank sloped downwards slightly, lowering the camera helped me block out the path, the bench and even the ski lift from the frame. What still bothered me though was the choppy surface of the water, all stirred up by the incoming storm. So I pulled out my Freewell magnetic ND filter and dialed it to its darkest setting, 9 stops. That's where the flexibility of the X2D really shines. With its native ISO of 64 and the ability to stop the lens down to f32, I could push the exposure all the way to 85 seconds, even in broad daylight. The result? Perfectly smooth water and beautiful motion blur in the clouds. Now, yes, at f32 you do lose some sharpness, and yeah, you definitely saw every dust spot on the sensor. But honestly, what matters most is the final image, and this one turned out beautifully. When getting low to the ground isn't enough, it's time for strategy number 2 to eliminate distractions from your shot. For my next image, I combined a low shooting angle with a much closer distance to the chapel. That way, I cut down on all the visual clutter between me and the subject. At the same time, the chapel now filled a much larger part of the frame and conveniently blocked a neighboring hut in the background. Through the XCD 38V, I saw a strong composition forming. The grass in the foreground created zigzagging lines leading directly to the chapel, and above it, dramatic storm clouds covered. And then, for a brief moment, a shaft of warm afternoon light lit up the entire chapel, giving the final image a beautiful golden glow. Inside the chapel, I had to pull off an impromptu tripod yoga session to capture as much of the wooden geometry as possible, using the XCD 21mm lens. The space is incredibly small, but I wanted to preserve its atmosphere and showcase the unique design from architect Mario Botta. When Marcus and I stepped back outside, we had to move fast. Lighting was flashing all around us, and the thunder felt like it was shaking the ground beneath our feet. So we sprinted back to the hut and were welcomed by our hosts with a big homemade dinner shared around a long wooden table. After 5 days of energy bars and cold benches, it felt amazing to sit down to a warm meal and good conversations. But honestly, my eyes were glued to the window. How long would the storm last? And would the sky open up again tonight? If you're enjoying this episode, hit that like button. It's a small click that makes a big difference. And if you don't want to miss the next video, where I share how filming behind the scenes footage almost ruined my Hasselblad X2D photo shoot, make sure to subscribe now. Sure enough, at 9 p.m. the clouds started to pull back, just like the night before. The sky wasn't fully clear yet, but we got to work. The tripod had survived the rain and were still in position. Finally, my drone was ready for action as a lighting tool. While Marcus placed an Aperture MC light on a stand and lit the interior of the chapel through the cross window, I flew the drone around the chapel, painting the landscape with light exactly how I wanted it to look. Pro tip: weather and time of day can actually help you simplify a messy location. At night, most distractions disappear, and in fog or snow, even chaotic scenes feel minimal and calm. That night, using a combination of 7 different exposures, I captured what would become the strongest image of the entire Enlightened series. The tiny Granatkapelle wrapped into the stillness of night, reflected in an endless sea of stars. To capture those stars, we had to get up painfully early again. At 4:30 a.m., the sky was crystal clear, and we took our second night shot at this location with the XCD 21mm in vertical format. But we were way too excited to go back to sleep. So we stayed outside, shivering and waiting for the first warm sunlight to break through the horizon. Which brings me to my third and fourth tips for shooting in visually crowded places. The day before, we walked around the chapel from every angle, looking for the cleanest possible background. Using the PhotoPills app, I mapped out exactly when the sun would hit specific parts of the chapel. This is something I do for every architectural or hotel shoot as well. Scouting, light planning, and a solid shoot schedule. That's how I was able to get another beautiful image. The first red sunlight reflecting off the back wall of the chapel. Combined with my fourth strategy, shooting with a longer focal length. In this case, the XCD 90V, I captured a stunning detail shot that made the chapel look like it was standing in a completely untouched mountain world. By 7 a.m., the low morning sun was at the perfect 90-degree angle, casting sidelight on the grasses and clouds and giving us a magical final image to end the shoot. So, what can you take away from this episode to apply to your own photography? A powerful image isn't about just location. It's about how you work with what's in front of you. You already have the tools to turn even the messiest spot into something extraordinary. It's just a matter of practice, training your eye, owning your vision, and knowing how to work a scene. Here's a quick recap of my 4 favorite strategies for isolating the subject in a crowded location. Scout your location thoroughly. Walk around, use an app like PhotoPills to plan your lighting. Get low. A ground level angle hides distractions quickly. Move closer. Your subject gets larger in the frame and hides the background. And finally, use longer focal lengths for tighter crops and fewer elements in your shot. And one last pro tip, try shooting at night in fog or even in snow. The world transforms. Want to master fine art photography or get the most out of your Hasselblad system? Check out my photography trips and one-on-one online workshops at albrechtforst.com. You can also own a limited edition fine art print from this series, available on my website. And if you haven't already, sign up for my VIP Club newsletter for exclusive content, early access to new workshops, and a free monthly wallpaper download. Like this episode? There's more. Explore the other episodes in this series. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever walked away from a location just because it felt too messy to shoot? Let's chat down in the comments below. Until then, have fun shooting and see you next time.